So I've been diving into some of the more taboo topics in religion lately, and I think we would all agree that no topic is more scandalous and taboo in Christianity than that little three-letter word, sex. Growing up in Christian youth group and going to Christian youth retreats, I was constantly being told how evil and perverse my sex drive was, and that there was nothing more displeasing to the Lord than my sexual thoughts. So like many of you watching, I'm sure, I spent the entirety of my teenage years feeling private guilt and shame about every sexual thought that I had, and doing literally everything I could to suppress and kill my sexuality, which is of course extremely unhealthy and impossible to do. And as you can imagine, this was a really difficult mindset to get rid of, because even after I got married, I still felt guilt and shame about having sex with my wife. And so if that's the kind of difficulty I went through as a straight man growing up in a Christian world, I literally shudder to think about the kind of torment that homosexual people have to deal with growing up in Christian households. The fact of the matter is that Christianity handles sexuality in the worst and unhealthiest possible way. And it's an issue that, in my opinion, doesn't get enough attention. So I recruited the help of my two good friends, Pastors Derrick and Kyle Butler, so that we could tackle this issue head on and talk about what a real, healthy, and spiritual approach to sexuality looks like. So if you're someone who also grew up in a religious environment, then I think you're going to especially enjoy and appreciate this episode. Also, as a fair warning, there's obviously going to be some explicit content in this episode, so if you're around your kids or listening to this at work, you might want to put your headphones in. So without further ado, in this episode, we're talking about real sex with Derrick and Kyle Butler.
So, what's that?
Oh, what do you want to title this episode? Let's call it All About Fucking.
and you said I'm going all the way live.
As long as we cross that line, then we all feel safe and we can just go to town, you know? I can't imagine we'll ever say that word during this podcast.
Yeah. Let's go with something. Let's say, let's borrow something from HBO and let's just call it real sex.
Okay.
I'm into that.
Yeah.
Not this
because see, if we say fucking in the title, right? You know, there are going to be people that look at the title and say,
dislike.
You know, you got to give them something to, some clickbait, right?
You gotta reel them in.
Draw them in a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
You got to woo them, you know?
And welcome to the podcast. With me today are my brothers, my friends, my partners in crime, Kyle Butler and Aaron Abke. These guys are awesome. And I think I'm I'm better than sliced bread. So
you're all right.
Yeah, I might.
Right.
So anyway, this is a joint podcast. So it's basically Aaron is going to be consuming this with his audience. I'm going to be consuming it with mine. And Kyle, I don't know what Kyle's going to do with this, but
God only knows what Kyle's going to do.
We're good. We're about to get real. We're about to get raw. This is going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. We're going to talk about sex, real sex, and how to get past all the taboos and all the the things that make people run and scurry in the corners when those three letters are mentioned, sex. It's like people pop fuses and they they kind of scurry and run. Oh my God, what do I do? Sex. I don't know how to handle this. But listen, sex is something that we all love, we all have, and God created it for our enjoyment.
So you're already getting taboo, Derrick.
I'm swinging. I come out swinging for the fences, man.
Sex is only for reproduction and for no other reason. Thus saith the Lord.
Yeah. Well, you know, that, you know, I would contend with, well, then why is masturbation so much fun? I'm just, you know, hey,
Because
listen.
sin is fun, Derrick. Sin is fun. That's how the devil lures you in.
That's how he lures us in. Yeah,
Yep.
I can dig it.
Little
So
bit
there are a
fun.
couple of points I want to cover, right? Number one, let's start with sex and marriage. All right, let's talk about, I mean, you just said, well, sex is for marriage and it's for reproduction. So Aaron, since you went down that path, let's go ahead and have, well, actually, no, yeah, you go ahead and open with that, and then we're going to segue to Kyle, because I think Kyle has something he wants to share on this.
Sex and marriage. Well, I have been married, and I've had sex in marriage. And what I can tell you is that sometimes two people are not compatible, but church tells them that they should get married before they find out if they're compatible. And in my personal experience, you know, this is what I was promised by my youth pastor and every, you know, Christian leader I'd ever met. Basically, this is the gospel they preach, right? Is, look, and this is almost word for word, look, God has a plan for you, and it's supposed to go this one specific way. And if you want God's blessing on your life and your marriage, all you have to do is not have sex before marriage. If you can do this one impossible thing, then all your life will flower. You will flourish. You'll be blessed richly. Your kids, your house, your wife, everything will be blessed if you just don't have sex before marriage. And I was like, all right, I'm in. Because you know what? My parents were actually one of the few, you know, the rare side of the spectrum of couples who didn't have sex before marriage and have had a wonderful marriage. And so I had that example to draw from, right? So I was like, well, this is obviously true. Like my parents did it, right?
Yeah.
So I had no shot at seeing through the, you know, ignorant side of this belief system when I was that age. So, you know, I wasn't a virgin when I got married, but I was celibate with the woman I married at the time, and thinking that, you know, because I had lost my virginity before I was married, I had this huge sense of guilt and shame. Like I felt like I was a closet serial killer or something, and I was the only like, I had committed the worst possible sin. So there was a lot of shame associated with that. And so my belief was, and this is what a youth pastor, a close friend of mine, told me, was, look, Aaron, God is a God of second chances, and he will absolutely give you that blessed, fruitful life if you do it his way this time. So, you know, find a good Christian girl, preferably a virgin, and get married to her. Don't have sex until marriage. And then bada bing, bada boom, your life will be blessed as you so hoped as a young kid. I was like, great, I'm in. So I went to Oral Roberts University, met a wonderful young lady. We fell in love, didn't have sex for almost 2 years before marriage, and got married and found out that we were massively incompatible. There was a whole host of issues that I won't go into, but the main issue was that she didn't seem to have any physical attraction to me. And as you can imagine, being a guy, being celibate for 2 years with the girl you're in love with, and then finding out she's like, you know, not attracted to you, was kind of devastating, to put it lightly. And so that kind of disillusioned me from religion, that experience did.
Yeah.
I've staked my whole life on this, and I did it. I mean, I followed the rule that everything's supposed to be great. Like God's supposed to sprinkle magic powder on us and give us a great sex life. Because, you know, that was what I was told. Like I would ask the pastor, well, what if we're not compatible? Like, how do we know if we're going to even have good sex? He's like, oh, don't worry about that. If you follow this rule, God will bless your sex life beyond your wildest dreams. Like, all right, cool. Like, you know, it's what your leader's telling you, so you believe it. And the opposite, the reverse was the case. And so to make a long, terrible, nightmare story short, there was, you know, dozens and dozens of nights in our marriage spent with her crying and sobbing and me holding her while she, you know, cries out, what's wrong with me? Why am I not, you know, why can't I feel this for you? I don't understand why I'm not normal. And I didn't either, but I just said, you know, we'll make it through this. And We went to therapy and counseling, and long story short, my ex-wife was an amazing person. I have nothing bad to say about her whatsoever. We just weren't compatible, and that was a really, really difficult thing because we were in love. Like, I really loved her. And to have our relationship end over just that one thing, like every other category we were a perfect match in, was pretty tough. And so from that point on, I was sort of disillusioned by religion because I knew for an absolute fact that promise was absolute garbage, and it's just not realistic. Like, you need to know if you're compatible with someone before you sign your life away. And so from there, I was like, well, if that was garbage, what other stuff do I believe is garbage?
Yeah. Well, like before we buy a car, we test drive the car. Before we buy a house, we tour the model. This is one of the things that I've always had an issue with. Why is premarital sex such a taboo?
That's a great question.
I listen, I understand if you take it to an extreme, right? Like let's say you're going out and you're having sex with hundreds of women. Okay. No, honestly, I mean, listen, I think that would be overkill. Mm-hmm. I think that would be kind of abusing it. Mm-hmm. But if you're genuinely interested in trying to find out whether or not you're compatible with someone, I don't think that it's an unrealistic thing to say, okay, maybe we should find some things out about each other.
Here's another good question, Derrick. What would a fundamentalist, argent, rigid pastor figure prefer? Would they prefer that I had sex with my wife before we got married, found out we weren't compatible, not gotten married, or gotten divorced? Like, which one's worse? Sex before marriage or divorce?
Good one, man.
You got to have one or the other, basically.
Yeah. Like Frank Sinatra said, you can't have one without the other, right?
Yeah.
So, Kyle, I want you to chime in on this because one of the things that I want to talk about is, not just the aspect of sex before marriage, but like basically how does sex manifest within the marriage? And I'll talk about that. I'll talk to that after Kyle talks about the fornication part. But I think he's chomping at the bit to fornicate. No, just to talk about fornication. So Kyle, go at it, man.
Well, I grew up in a religious environment where rules were key, and we were all about rules. We were all about obligation and doing this and doing that. And one of the huge things that we were told was, of course, no sex, no partying, no anything. And as I got a little bit older, when I started hitting, 16, 17 in that age group where of course I'm a young boy, young teenager, I want to experiment, I want to do things. I was always extremely scared because I thought, at any minute, if I'm doing something wrong, God can come back and I'll miss the whole boat. And of course I didn't want that to happen.
Wow.
So I lived with that pressure for a long time. But as I got older, now I'm in my 20s and I haven't gotten married yet. Well, let me start off by saying I've never been married. So the question most people probably want to know, have I had sex? I'm going to say, yes, I have. I'm going to say that in those early years with the girlfriends I had earlier in life, it was always with a lot of shame and guilt afterwards. I'd always end up at the altar. I'd always end up begging God for forgiveness. I'd always end up, God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I would pray. I would fast. I tried to pray it away. I tried to fast the desire away. I tried to just get rid of it the best way I could because I wanted to be pleasing to God. But, and I probably lived that way for a long, long time, doing it because I enjoy it, but dealing with a tremendous amount of guilt and shame afterwards. And it was always this dichotomy where, you really enjoy, but you really hate yourself after it. And, which one will prevail? And, I tried to hate my way out of it, but that didn't work. I tried to, again, pray and fast my way out of it. None of those things worked. And it probably was about maybe about, in my mid 30s. I remember after struggling now for a little bit over 10 years with the issue, remember saying to God one day, look, God, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. I've prayed about it. I fasted. I've done all I can do. I guess, God, you're just going to have to be upset with me until I get married, because I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. You're just going to be upset at me until I get married, because I thought marriage was the only way to fix this issue. Marriage was the only way that God was finally going to be pleased. He was finally going to be happy. He was finally going to say, okay, son, now we can be on good terms because you're no longer fornicating. And I remember when I said that, I heard nice and clear, why do you think I'm not pleased with you?
Come on.
Why do you think I'm unhappy with you? And I went down my list because, and all of the becauses is what I've been told. I'm just regurgitating to him everything I've been told. Oh, it's better to marry rather than burn. Oh, God is not pleased with this. Oh, God, and I ran down this whole list, and he asked me again, what makes you think I'm not pleased with you?
Mm.
That brought me great peace. That brought me great peace. So I'm at a place now in my life, I don't do guilt. I don't do shame. I don't do any of that. Do I have sex? Sure do. Am I going to stop? Sure not. Will I get married one day? Sure will. So,
That's a smart man right there.
Now, someone's going to say, but Kyle, Pastor Kyle, whatever you want to call me, that's wrong. You're leading young people astray. You're giving people a license to do wrong. I'm not giving people a license to do anything. I'm telling people, be at peace.
Yeah.
Be at peace. As Derrick said earlier, we're not saying go out and be the town gigolo or be the town whore or, just do malicious things towards people in this thing. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about two people that are in relationship, haven't gotten married yet. You shouldn't have to live with the guilt and shame of doing something that you've been told is so evil and so vicious, so vile, that is only acceptable once you walk down the aisle and get this magic piece of paper, and all of a sudden now it's okay. Well, I want to ask a question about that magic piece of paper.
And I'm glad you mentioned the magic sheet of paper, because honestly, in traditional biblical marriage, it had nothing to do with a piece of paper. It had everything to do with the coming together of the man and the woman, which really kind of centered around two things. Number one, families joining together, joining their assets or whatever together, and sex. So basically, if you think about it, sex is sort of like biblical marriage.
Right. I there's a story with Isaac, and he's in the field. It's hot.
I was
tired.
just about to bring this up.
He's a young buck. He's just ready to get it going. He looks up. He sees Rachel coming on this horse. He runs out to meet her, falls instantly in love, and it says that he took her into his mama's house that night.
Now, and there you go.
Unless they had the pastor there or the priest there or whoever was there to make it official, we can use our imaginations as to what that meant. Now, this is a story we have reference to, and I've always used this story to say, hey, when you know. You don't need the certificate. You don't need the ceremony necessarily for it to come together. Two people came together under full consent, and that's what happened. And again, the impression might be, well, Carl, you're telling people to go out and just disregard the rules. I'm not telling you to disregard anything. If the rule is bondage to you, then I'm going to tell you to disregard it. But what I will tell you this, if you don't have peace about what you're doing, and if the reason why you don't have peace is because of what you've been told is so wrong about what you're doing, you're never ever going to come to a place of submitting to the rule. That's never going to happen. I've tried it. I've done every possible thing I can do within myself to come under the order of the rule, and I just couldn't do it because I had already come to a place of I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's part of being human.
we need to get rid of the stigma. We need to get rid of the heading that we've been under for so long about this. Look, I've got nieces and nephews. I tell my nephews, hey, you don't need any kids. You're gonna have sex. We don't need any kids right now. Be smart. You know, I don't have the pastorly answer. Well, the Bible says. I don't have that answer. Because it didn't work for me.
The Bible doesn't say.
Right. And I'm a
answer.
pastor, and I have sons. I have all sons, and I'm the same way.
I don't have that answer because it didn't work for me. It didn't work for my sisters. It didn't work for the other young people in my church. It didn't work for anybody that I know. It didn't work for any of us. And we all endured the guilt and the shame and all that stuff. And my sister got pregnant early and was forced into a marriage with someone she wasn't in love with. The marriage was a disaster only because they were trying to save face in the church with my mom and the pastor. That's the only reason why. Yeah. He came over to the house, convinced these two people who would not even look each other in the eye. They wouldn't even look each other in the eye, and convinced them that the best thing for them to do is to get married. They had a disastrous marriage. My best friend, same thing. He quoted to me, the Bible says it's better to marry than to burn, so I guess I better marry her. They had a horrible marriage. The list goes on and on and on. So if you think getting married just so that you can get over this, I'm fornicating, I'm sinning, I'm doing God dirty, let me tell you, don't do it. Stay where you are.
Now watch this. You know, people talk. Somebody had inboxed me recently. They said, "How do you feel about being unequally yoked?" You know, in other words, they were saying a believer and a non-believer. And since I'm of the mindset that, you know, all of humanity is all in Christ, there is no believer and unbeliever kind of thing. But when I believe when the Bible says, "Do not be unequally yoked," listen. If you're a guy and you like to say, you know, you have a strong sex drive where, let's say, you like to get busy twice a day, and your wife wants to do it once a week, you know, that's unequally yoked, right?
For sure.
Or, you know, or if you're into something like, you know, where you're into changing positions, or you're into different, you know, oral sex, anal sex, whatever it is, and your wife isn't, or she is and you're not, that's unequally yoked. And
if you're a freak and she ain't a freak, you unequally yoked.
Come on.
That's simple.
Listen, and I'm gonna tell you, you know, like you talked about this early on, Aaron, and, you know, whether or not you knew what your sexual compatibility was beforehand. Mm-hmm. Because what happens if you marry a freak and you can't keep up?
You know what they told us was, one of the things they told us was, well, see, the reason why you don't want to get involved in sex before marriage, and you don't want your spouse to be involved with sex before marriage, is because, see, they won't know what to expect, and you won't know what to expect. So if let's say if your wife has been out there with several men, then she's going to come to expect certain things from you that you may not be able to do, and vice versa. So that's why you should keep it pure, because when you go into this thing, you both won't know what to expect, and it'll be magical for both of you, like Aaron was saying earlier. I was told the same thing.
Yep.
But, you know.
Listen, I told my kids the same
complex
stuff. But you know, though, that completely discounts this thing called the internet.
Great point.
Because, you know, like, you're thinking, hey, you know, I'm a virgin, she's a virgin, you know, we come together and everything is all sweetness
of sex.
And then one of you discovers Pornhub, you know, and then you know, you follow what I'm saying? It's like it gets to be
there's no way around it.
And you can't put a boundary around that, you know.
It's such an unrealistic and unhumanistic point of view to have, right? Like, we would never expect somebody to deny their appetite, or their need for sleep, or their need for water, right? These are basic human needs, biological needs. Yep. And like, sex totally falls in that category. And there's nothing that we can do about it. Like, just like there's nothing we can do about having an appetite for food. Like, it is part of the human package. And my contention with God was always, I was always really upset at God for giving me this sex drive, because I'm like, yo, bro, like this is apparently the most evil thing possible to you. And you hit my strongest urge possible.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What do you expect me to do here? Like, you've put me between a rock and a hard place. Like, I want to do the right thing. Like Kyle, when you said that you felt shame and guilt and you fasted, dude, I did all of the same exact stuff. I would literally lock myself in my room for a weekend and fast and read the Bible and beg God and pray and cry out for forgiveness, because I felt such a tremendous weight of guilt, like I murdered somebody.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did nothing wrong.
Right.
It's absolutely insane that they teach kids this stuff. But the funny thing about it, to me, the ironic thing about it, is that the church, by making sex so incredibly taboo, succeeds in making it the most fascinating possible thing on earth. Like, if they just didn't talk about it as much, people would, like, there'd be way less Christian sex scandals if they just were like, yeah, sex is a thing. Like, you would tell these pastors cheating on their wives, and they come out like, oh, I've been having sex with male prostitutes for 20 years. You know, all these crazy sex scandals we see people getting caught in. It's like, if we just let people express their human nature in a healthy way, or teach them how to express it in a healthy way, we wouldn't have these problems. But guess what? It's not realistic to look at a 16-year-old kid and be like, you can't masturbate, you can't watch porn, you can't even think about sex, let alone have it. That's totally off the plate. Like, that doesn't compute with biology.
Right.
You know?
No. Right. It doesn't. You're 16, 17, 18.
All you think about
your hormones.
That's all you think about. That's all you think about. And then once you partake, it's all you think about afterwards.
Yeah.
Dude, I thought about sex less after I had it.
Really?
No, I was different. You know, there's this thing they call in addiction, they call it chasing the dragon. You know, where you're going after that initial experience, that initial high. And listen, after I had sex, man, I was chasing the dragon for years. I was trying to find that exact combination that produced that euphoria from the first time.
Yep.
And,
like a drug.
You know, it is. But again, it's because it's not normalized, because it's made a taboo, and because it's something that we sweep under the carpet. We don't deal with it frankly. And speaking of dealing with things frankly, I want to touch on this real quick before we completely change gears. And it's this: what about what goes on in the bedroom? Let's say two consenting adults, you know, I don't know if you like oral sex, you know, or if you like anal sex, or if you like, bondage and discipline kind of thing. You know, people will tell you, well, you can't have that kind of deviant behavior and expect to have the God's blessing on the sexual part of your marriage. What would you have to say about that?
I think the word you use best fits it for me: consenting. Two consenting adults. I think if we're talking about it in these terms, you got two consenting adults. Listen, and I'm not trying to be vulgar here at all, but you know, I've been in different relationships. Again, I haven't been married, so I've had several relationships up until now. And I mean, I've been with some women who want to do some things that I didn't even think about. like, okay, baby.
You want to put that where?
That's how you get down?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Let's see how this works. You know?
Hey, I have a handkerchief that's knotted every 6 inches, you know.
Use your imagination.
You know, so to me, it's consenting. You know, if you have two consenting people doing it, then I don't see anything wrong with anything that goes on in a bedroom situation.
I couldn't agree more. I think the answer is super simple. It's like, you know, in Christianity, we're taught that right and wrong is a set of concepts. You must memorize them and learn them, and they change based on what church you go to, right? That doesn't seem to make any sense from, you know, the standpoint of God created the universe. It's like, well, then truth is pretty much infused in creation. If we're just present with the moment, truth lets itself be known to us, right? If we have pure intentions and we want to follow our integrity, truth is the most obvious thing in the universe. So like if you're with somebody else, there is no such thing as wrong other than what violates another person's free will, right? So if you're hurting another person, that's, wrong in that sense. And as long as both of you are consenting, there's nothing wrong with anything in that situation, right? And I think if we're going to teach kids a healthy point of view about sex, we need to let them know that, right? Like this is a very sacred gift to give another person. So like, don't use this gift to manipulate people, because that's wrong. That's hurting people.
Yep.
Use it to take advantage of people. Obviously, don't force yourself on somebody. Don't abuse people. Like, how there's sometimes people get in relationships where, like we see this in high school or college all the time, where like this one guy finds a girl that's like, she sort of thinks he's out of her league. And so he uses that to his advantage to like, he doesn't have any feelings for her. He just uses her for sex. And she's like, oh, I'm just going to keep having sex with him until he falls in love with me. And he leads her on over and over. Mm-hmm. Eventually her heart breaks. That stuff is wrong, right?
Yep.
Outside of that, sex itself, it's just molecules interacting with molecules, right? What matters is integrity.
So that being said, let's go ahead and change gears completely, because I want to talk about, this is a heavy topic in the church, and it's a heavy topic in society right now. So I want to talk about homosexuality. And before we go into this, I want to say, again, going back to what we mentioned a few minutes ago, that what goes on between two consenting adults is what goes on between two consenting adults. So I don't assign or ascribe anything right or wrong to it, but people always fall back to scripture and they say, well, God created Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve, or, so let's talk about this, because, I want to take the taboo off that, because listen, there are a whole bunch of people that are in the church living a lie, trying to be something that they're not, and they're suffering, they're hurting. And what I'm hoping to do in this discussion is to take some of that hurt away.
I watched a series on TLC called, I just lost the title. It's a show on TLC. It's 3 men who was married at the time, who decided that they didn't want to be men any longer. So I guess it kind of picked up off of the gender thing, perhaps. And I was curious about it, because prior to watching the show, my position was, you selfish SOB. You knew what you were.
That's short for son of a bitch, by the way, in case anybody's wondering.
We did the swearing episode, so we're good.
Okay. Sorry. I couldn't pass that up. That was just a big, meaty fastball. Sorry.
A grand slam.
Low hanging fruit.
But I was always under the impression, you're selfish. You knew what you were. You brought a woman into this. You brought children into this. Now they're confused, they're hurt. And that was just incredibly selfish. You should have just stayed where you were. But while I'm watching this series, I'm captivated as each man is telling his story. And I kid you not, what captivated me was they're telling the story and I can see the pain in their faces. I can hear the pain in their words. And they're talking about how for years they desperately tried to get rid of how they felt inside. For years they felt like there was something so wrong with them. How they tried to fit in, how they tried to be normal, how they tried. That's why they got married. That's why they had children. But inside, the turmoil was always there. And they came to a point they just couldn't take it anymore. They didn't want to live a lie anymore. And I found myself having compassion for people that was hurting in ways I never thought they were before. And that changed my whole outlook. That changed everything. Because for me, when I can hear your story, now, when I can really hear your story, and I think that's when empathy and understanding and compassion should always come to the forefront. Mm-hmm. When we can hear someone's story, mm-hmm. that's when we get rid of these stupid rules. That's when we get rid of these stupid guidelines we've put over people, because we hear their story, and it changed my whole perspective of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say that for now. Let you guys jump in on that, but
that's awesome, man.
I think totally differently about it now.
I had a very similar experience too with actually my uncle. My dad has two brothers, and his brother that's a year younger than him. He was, born gay, and they were a Nazarene household. Their parents were pastors and stuff. And so I don't know if you know anything about the Nazarene denomination, but it's very strict, very fundamentalist. They got to have their hair slicked back. So you can imagine being, Corey, my uncle, and like not knowing how to handle this. And, from the time he was a little kid, he knew he was different. And so long story short, he was in college and he had gotten married. He had been doing counseling for years to try and, pray the gay away and all that stuff. And he even got married to a woman he was best friends with, who she was in love with him. He's a super good looking guy, but just not attracted to women. Right. So she was like, well, I'll give this a shot, and, they had the same exact experience that I had with my ex-wife. It was just a total disaster. They couldn't get anything to work, and they had to divorce, and they loved each other. It was super painful. But my family had completely ostracized him for years because, well, if you're going to accept your own demonic nature, then we can't, be in your life until you repent and stuff. So he was just on his own and moved to LA, lived his own life. And when I was about 18, my family had started sort of like coming back out to him and saying, hey, sorry for what we did. Like, let's have some kind of relationship and stuff. So when I was 18, he invited me to come to a retreat he was being a part of at this huge hotel resort in Arizona. And I'm an 18-year-old adult now, so I can make my own decisions. And I was like, yeah, like I remember him from when I was a kid. He was my favorite uncle. I feel totally safe. So at that point, I still believed homosexuality was a sin because I'm an 18-year-old Christian kid. Mm-hmm. So I go to Arizona with him. We have this awesome weekend at this amazing hotel resort, have a ton of fun. And we were working out at the gym. And then afterwards we went to the steam room to cool off. And he told me his whole life story. And I just couldn't believe my ears, man. Like, to hear what this guy went through, the 4 or 5 years of demonic deliverance counseling to try and get the demons out of him. And he eventually was like, look, I cannot deny who I am anymore. If my whole family ostracizes me, like imagine getting to this point, right? My church, my friends, everyone I know is a Christian. I will lose everyone in my life. But the pain of denying who I am is so great that I would rather just accept myself now. That's what he did. And, as an 18-year-old kid, I thought to myself, why would someone choose to place that burden on themselves, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense if you're not born gay. That just blows that stereotype out of the water because, the funniest thing, when you hear a Christian say that, oh, they choose to be gay. No one's born gay. God doesn't make any gay people. Well, it's like, okay, why don't you just choose to be gay then? You're straight, right? Go ahead and choose to be gay. Do it. I dare you. Yep. It's not going to happen. I promise you. And in the same way, you can't tell someone who's born homosexual you can't force them to be straight, right? Yeah. That was sort of my wake-up call, was like after hearing his story, like you said, Kyle, a real human story. The compassion in you can't deny the truth of what you're hearing. Like, this is this person's life. And when it comes down to it, nobody has the right to tell anyone who they are except them,
Yeah. Yeah, the show, I just looked it up. The show's called Lost in Transition.
I've heard of that.
Okay. Yeah. And out of curiosity, I watched it. And again, hearing the pain in these men's stories was a huge eye-opener for me. And then I stumbled on a doctor. He's an actual doctor and a pastor. And he went, he's on YouTube. I can't think of his name right now. I should have looked it up before the show. But he went into the medical, biological, genetic, to the heart of this. And I don't have it word for word, but there's something that in the transgender group, you know, for lack of better terms, they have everything they should have had, let's say, to be a man, everything they should have had to be a woman. But there's this one little chromosome or gene or something that one switch that said, okay, now this is the personality of the woman, this is the personality of the man or whatever. But that one switch is off. Although they have everything else, they have absolutely everything else except for that one little switch. And this has been proven medically. So, you know, when I heard that, I was like, wow, we've probably destroyed thousands of good people.
Yeah.
Simply because we didn't understand. Simply because we didn't know. Simply because we tried to demify everything and control everything and fit everything into the boxes that made us comfortable. Well, you know, that is, if that's not the staple of religion, then I don't know what else is. You fit in this box because I'm comfortable with this box, and I'm uncomfortable with that box, and I'm uncomfortable with that box. And if you want to be comfortable with us, you fit in this box, and this is how we want it. And we've destroyed so many lives with that mindset and that brutality of treatment towards others, simply because we didn't understand. And people are going to watch this video and they're not going to want to understand, and that's fine. They're not going to want to understand because they're going to be stuck on what the Bible says, what the Bible says, what the Bible says. No, that phrase for me is becoming just an absolute
because that's in their interpretation. But I want to throw something out here real quick. I had two cousins, and they were brothers, and from as long as I can remember, you know, from childhood, they were, you know, soft, effeminate. You know, they were gay. Okay, and I remember being horribly ashamed of these guys. You know, I was very popular in high school. And we'd go to like these skating functions with multiple high schools. And matter of fact, the one that was a Halloween skate party. And one of my cousins came dressed as a witch, and the other one came dressed as a nurse. Now they're guys, and everybody's like, "Derrick, are those your cousins?" And I'm like, "Holy fuck, yeah, they are." You know, and I'm just, you know, mortified, right? Well, here's what happened as we grew up. One of them, someone got hold of him, said something to him, but he changed his program. And he got married. And he and his wife, they've been married 30 years. And they have kids, and they have an awesome relationship. And that's awesome. But my other cousin, his older brother, you know, never changed. And I remember, you know, I used to always try to hopefully pray it away. You know, I'm going to cast out this devil kind of thing, right? I'm trying to preach at him. And one time I was talking with him, and I said, well, you know, who molested you? Who impacted you in your childhood? And he said, Derrick, nobody molested me. Nobody touched me. Nobody abused me. He said, I just grew up never being attracted to girls. Mm-hmm. He said, this has always been who I am. And at that time, and I'm going to tell you, I have very few regrets in my life, but this is one of them, because I never really empathize with him. I listened to his story, but I listened from the standpoint of, oh, I can still pray this away. I can get on my face before God. I can fast, and I can do all of these things, and hopefully just, you know, pray the gay away. Mm-hmm. And now, you know, he died, I think 6 years ago, and with most of the family having ostracized him. And I so deeply regret, you know, now understanding how love is really, how it's manifest from God in us. And and I never was able to do that with him. And so for me, it's really a big thing that, you know, when people come to me and they say, hey, you know, I'm trapped in homosexuality and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And the thing that I tell people, I don't care what it is that you're going through, you know, God is not changing you. God is not going to supernaturally come in and tweak your desires and all of that. If there is something in you that says, okay, this is what I really want, and that desire is expressed, then maybe you might change. But if that doesn't happen, I think that humanity, we need to be more loving, more empathetic, more compassionate with this. And I really, this is obviously a big thing for me. And let me just say this, right? Because I like women. I like sex with women. I've never been attracted to a guy, even though you two guys are really good looking, but I've never been attracted to a guy. But you follow what I'm saying? But the thing is, like, just like I have certain, like my wife is vertically challenged. I like short women. You know, I don't like tall women, you know, and that's just kind of how I'm wired. And so when people have an attraction or a desire, I'm of the mindset now that this is something that's hard-coded in our DNA. It's something that, you know, people say, oh, well, you know, you can't be born that way. And I used to operate from that premise, and Lord help me, forgive me, everyone. I just don't believe that anymore.
It's an incredibly stupid argument.
Incredibly
ignorant argument. Like, their perspective, they treat homosexuality like it's a disease or something, right? Well, God doesn't make people gay because God only makes perfect people. Okay, well then why are there people born with all kinds of diseases and illnesses?
Right.
Exactly. Not saying homosexuality is a disease, because it's not. It's beautiful and there's nothing wrong with it. But from their perspective, that argument defeats itself. Like, there's a whole spectrum of people being born with all kinds of different conditions. When you look in the animal kingdom, every species of animal has a huge spectrum of big, tall, short, fat, skinny, small, you know, like all kinds of different in each species. Why would humans be any different? And if God is the creator of all that exists, then you have to acknowledge that God does make people gay. And that means that's an expression of God too. And that means they're equally valid. And the church has treated gay people so heinously, so sinfully, wickedly. You know, in the church, I remember going to Oral Roberts University, and, you know, there's, especially in the music scene, which I was there for music and theology, there's tons of homosexuals in the music scene, right, in church.
Yep.
The most talented musicians in church are usually homosexual, but in the closet, because if they come out, the church will kick them out of the church, right?
Right.
So they're repressing themselves, and like everyone, we all know it, you know. Okay, Stevie, you know, we all know, but don't talk about it because it's school finds out, they'll expel him and stuff. And you know, you got to sign an honor code. I won't be gay. I won't drink. I won't have sex. It's like so ridiculous. I won't be who I am. And it's just, imagine someone telling you you can't be with the woman you love, that it's you're evil for wanting to be with her. You demonically possessed person. Like, we have treated these poor, beautiful human beings so wickedly. And I think the church is coming around now. But I hope we see the church fall on its face and repent for the sins they've committed against the homosexual community, because it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. You know, I want to just add this in real quick, and, you know, okay. We brought up the phrase, pray it away. Well, why doesn't that work? Haven't people fallen on their face, begged God to take it away? Wouldn't that be his opportunity to jump in and say, oh boy, I've been waiting for this prayer to come. They're down there right now sobbing their face off. Let me go snatch this away from them.
We begged God to take our lust away.
Right?
Yep.
If he didn't jump in at their request, not ours, not I'm praying for you that God will, no, they prayed.
They did it.
You know, tons of people, they prayed, sincere, crying, you know, sobbing, Lord, please. Well, that would have been his perfect opportunity. He would have had all the right lined up with the universe and the whole nine to say, okay, here it is.
Yep.
I won't violate the will. I won't violate their desire.
Yep.
They've turned this over to me. Oh boy, I've been waiting for this day. Let me swoop down and snatch it away. Now, see, that's the kind of thinker I am. I think like that. That's the way I think. And I always think the opposite, because, you know, if we're saying this, then we always have to look at the opposite side of it. And if the opposite side says something, we need to pay attention to what the opposite side says too. And the question is, the opposite side of that is, why hasn't God swooped down at the request of these and taken it away?
Absolutely. And furthermore, what point of view does that give people about God? That he's a giant monarchical asshole.
Exactly.
The church.
Exactly.
God, I did everything, bro. What's wrong with you, man?
Right.
I can't beg any harder.
Right.
And you know, one of the things that I think is a big problem. One part of why sex is such a taboo. You know, in the Bible they talk about like Diana worship, right? And how they had prostitutes in the temple, and that sex was part of their religious exercise. And this is what I've come to the conclusion of, is that sex is a very spiritual thing. I mean, there's nothing.
Sure.
What's that?
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing. I don't think that there's any feeling that makes you feel closer to God when you're having sex. But when you turn it into a religious exercise, in other words, you have to do this in order to get this.
Missionary only.
Yeah. You know, no multiple positions, no cunnilingus, you know, you can't do any of that. You know,
it's displeasing.
Knob job is off the table, you know. Basically, well, not just religious in restrictions, but let's say religious in permissions. Because, like, for example, you have certain Christian sects that permit polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
it's in the Bible.
You know, it is in the Bible.
It's all over the Bible.
It is. So, you know, is that a religious abuse of sex, or is that a religious manifestation of sex? And all of these things, you know, you have to take all of this stuff into consideration.
Well, there's actually no Bible verses that prohibit sex before marriage, number one.
Nope.
There's also no Bible verses that prohibit masturbation, number two. Pornography wasn't around back then, but
what about Onan? Onan,
the guy
let's talk about Onan, because that's the masturbation scripture.
Right. But wasn't that I don't barely remember that passage, but isn't it that the Lord was angry with him because he didn't put his seed in his wife for a child?
Yeah,
it wasn't like, how dare you masturbate?
Yeah, he was married to his brother's wife, you know, because that was the tradition.
Yes.
And you know, he was having sex with her, and basically what Onan did, you know, people say, oh, Onan, he masturbated and God wasn't pleased. I say, no, Onan did the first pornographic money shot, you know. You know, he pulled out and let her rip, you know.
I mean, David had 1,000 concubines. 1,000.
And Solomon had many wives.
Multiple thousands.
And they were not all of the Jewish persuasion.
Probably not.
And David, when he got older, he was weak. And they said,
oh, I love this.
Go find me some young heifers. Bring some young girls in here. Let's see if we can stimulate him and get him. You understand?
Yeah. So they put the young girls in bed with him to see if he'd get aroused.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably so many more Bible verses to support polygamy and fornication than there is to prohibit those kind of things. You know what I mean?
I don't see how a father who looks out upon creation in all of our diversity and can have a problem with any segment of that diversity. I just can't see that any longer. For it to be such, I said something the other day in a post, if we were born into sin like some believe, and if God hates sin, as we've been told, then the only conclusion we can draw is God hates us.
Right.
So if God hates homosexuality and a person is here crying their eyes out for it, then why won't he jump in and deal with what he hates?
But Kyle, what about love the sinner and hate the sin? Come on, man.
I mean, the truth is we don't separate those, do we?
No,
Let's just tell the truth. We don't separate those.
No.
We think we do.
Yes, you can.
And my God, it sounds so precious, doesn't it? It sounds so good.
Pious
I'm going to
and
tell you how
religious.
much I hate what you're doing, and how I'm a
But it's
dog
all
you
out of
down
love.
with it. I'm going to just put this on you and make you feel like a fucking failure in plain English. I'm just going to really just make you feel awful about it. And then I'm going to wrap my little holy arms around you and tell you, but I love you.
Yeah,
No,
that
you
whole
don't.
speaking the truth in love.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't love me.
Yeah.
You hate me. You hate what I'm doing. And you just fall short of saying you hate me because you're telling me how much you hate what I'm doing.
And they're just trying to stroke their own ego too.
Yeah, that whole speaking the truth in love thing, that's the biggest bullshit, right? Because whenever I hear somebody say that, they're saying basically, I want to kick you in the nuts and I want to justify it and salve my own conscience with scripture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, I was going to add this in about the woman at the well. Jesus never told her, close your legs.
Told her to get it.
Keep your legs closed. What's your problem?
You've had 5
I'm not
husbands
pleased.
before.
I'm not happy with this. So he didn't condemn her for her divorce. Divorce is, and he didn't condemn her for shacking up with a man.
Yep.
No condemning there at all. What does he do? He charges her. He invigorates her. He gives her life that she didn't feel that she had. And she becomes, and a lot of people won't admit this, but she becomes one of his greatest evangelists of that time.
Yeah, he ordained her to preach and sent her.
Yeah.
A 5 times divorced woman.
Yeah. Now, the Lord asked me this some years ago, and I wasn't quite ready for the answer, to give the right answer then. He's asked me when I was first learning grace, and it was a challenging question. He said, son, if I told you to let someone preach in your church who you knew, and this was a phrase I heard because this was my mentality at the time, was a flaming homosexual, would you let them? And I was like, look, God, you're going to have to check me on that one because I don't think I can do that.
Go too far.
I don't think I can do that right there. I just don't think I could.
Come on, God, really?
Yeah, I just don't think I can do that. I mean, if I know, I know. Now, if I don't know, that's different. But if I know, I don't think I can do that because I was still stigmatized by the stigma. But I wouldn't have that problem today. I wouldn't have that problem at all.
You bring up
Not
an
at all.
interesting point there, Kyle. I actually have witnessed this before at ORU. Somebody who, I didn't witness it, but this is the whole Carlton Pearson story. If you guys are familiar with him,
Yeah.
I think was it Oral Robert's son or Richard Roberts' son that was a homosexual in
Richard
the closet.
Roberts' son.
Yes,
Richard's son. Yeah.
and everyone knew it, but the church didn't know it. And because he's anointed, I think he was a music leader of some sort or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes out, someone finds out, the church spreads the news, and they go, "Oh, we found out that so we have to ostracize him." And it's like, all you motherfuckers knew he was gay for years. And let him play piano and sing in your church because he's a good
Exactly.
kid. You know what I mean? It's like the two-faced. And what you said, Kyle, in the excerpt you read, you brought up another great point. It's the whole concept of what you fight, you strengthen, right?
Right.
We try to fight the sex drive and fight, homosexuals and stuff. And look at the fruit that's produced, man. Like,
Right.
the Catholic Church, for example, nobody suppresses sexuality more than the Catholic Church.
Oh my God.
Right.
They have created
Look at what it's
a
done.
culture of monsters. of
Yeah.
sexual predators who prey on
Right.
little children. It's literally hell on earth in the Catholic Church for most little.
Well, you know, come to find out, it's not just little children, because the nuns, you know, basically, you know, they turn the nuns into, you know, St. Mary's whorehouse,
Yeah.
right? I mean, priests were pimping out nuns and impregnating them. It's crazy.
Insane. It's insane. I mean,
So it's like this whole, and let me say this, and I want to throw this out here because this is totally hypothetical, but this is something my wife and I we discussed, because when the Dan Brown novels came out, the Da Vinci Code and all of that, you know, part of the premise of that is that Jesus and Mary Magdalene married and had children, and where they had a daughter, and this daughter continued the bloodline into modern times.
right.
And I keep thinking about this. You know, I say, okay, you know, Jesus was familiar with all of our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Why then would God withhold the very best feeling that he gave humanity to his son?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that has always.
I got to leave this conversation. I can't go here. I got to leave this conversation.
and so I when I was young in ministry, I had actually couched the subject with some elders, and they said, "Well, Day, you have to understand that the church is the bride of Christ, and that when we come together in union with him, that his and I was like, I said, okay, so wait a minute, we're all having sex with Jesus, you know, and I'm just.
There's some denominations that actually do that. Like there's some things that, you know what I mean?
So my thing is that when, you know, and people always talk about the infallibility of Scripture, but there was a whole lot of Scripture that was left on the cutting room floor, and some of this was from Mary Magdalene, some of it was from Mary, the mother of Jesus, some was from Thomas, and so on and so forth. And in a lot of these documents, it deals with Jesus's sexuality.
I mean, the whole belief system is so contradictory, right? Like God creates man and woman, God says it's good and all that stuff, and he created sex, he invented sex. He had to literally think about how to do it and what should happen and how it should feel and why we should desire it. And then he makes, you know, according to the Christian tradition, he makes his son go down to earth and be a human to be tested in all the same ways. And there is nothing inherently evil about anything God created, right? What would be wrong about Jesus having gotten married and having a child? Like, isn't that a beautiful, wonderful thing? Isn't that an expression of God's intelligence?
I would think so. I mean, but this is one of those ones. I had to throw it out there because since we're talking about sex, you know, hey, what about Jesus?
Well,
you know?
there's actually, I don't know if you guys know this, there's an amazing documentary that I watched. I can't remember the name of it, but I can find it. I'll link it in my show notes. It's this whole documentary where these people had found in the Jewish tradition, they kept these things called bone boxes. I don't know the name. It's not sarcophagus, obviously.
Ossuary.
Thank you, ossuary.
Yep.
And in Israel, they uncovered an ossuary that says the ossuary of Yeshua of Nazareth in ancient Hebrew. And it has, what they would do back then is they would bury like everyone in the matriarch's or patriarch's family in their tomb with them in the bone boxes. Yeah. And you go into this ancient 2,000-year-old ossuary site, and it has engraved on one Yeshua of Nazareth. All the bones have been stolen over this millennium, but it has his brothers, it has Mary, and it has another one that says their son was like Jehoshua or something. It says son of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, engraved in ancient Hebrew. And they do this whole investigation on it. They do all the forensics on it, and they find, yep, this is a genuine 2,000-year-old. And the Jewish people, the Jewish authorities find out that they've excavated this tomb, which is illegal to do in Israel, and they shut it off and seal the tomb before they can finish their investigation. But even on the walls of the tomb, it says stuff. And the crazy thing is, you know how in Mark it lists Jesus' brothers? It does in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, I believe. And in Matthew and Luke, they list a little bit differently than Mark does, Mark being the most original one. And in Mark, there's a name of a brother that's a different name that appears in Matthew and Luke. Well, they go through the bone boxes and they find this one bone box that has a different name in it, like Cyphus or something. They're like, well, this doesn't fit the narrative. And they're like, wait a second, isn't in Mark there's one brother that's a different name? They look up the name in Hebrew and it's the exact name that's engraved.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing, you guys.
Wow.
So he very well may have a child, passed on his genes.
Wow.
And I think
Amazing.
That's beautiful.
Me too. You know, I just opened this up for discussion on my Facebook wall. I've always, growing up in church, I always had this image of Jesus at the wedding, sitting here like this the whole time.
Holy.
And you're sitting there and like, woman, what do you want? What do you want from me? Like, and that's the image I had all those years until I became more liberated. And I can't imagine Jesus not partying and dancing and drinking. No,
Jesus was
and
getting his
celebrating
jig on, man,
and just getting down. I mean, he was there at the party. Why wouldn't he be? No. I mean, why else would he be there?
Hey, while we're pouring gasoline on fires, let me just go ahead and throw one real big one out here, because while we're in speculation, right?
Might as well.
Okay, whose wedding was it? Now, before you answer that, understand that historically, we're taught that Jesus or Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, died when Jesus was a teenager because he was an older guy. So in Jewish custom, the parents of the groom are responsible for the festivities. And there is a Jewish, mindset that people who meddle in other people's affairs is called busybodying. And so if Mary was concerned about the wine at someone else's wedding, she would have been considered a busybody. But if this happened to be the wedding feast of the Lord, I'm just throwing it out there so that call me blasphemous, call me a heretic, get the torches and pitchforks. Let's roast this motherfucker once and for all. Yes.
That's actually a really good point, Derrick, and I'll give you one further than that too. Are you guys familiar with a bishop, Bishop John Shelby Spong?
Yep.
Oh, yes, he's amazing. So in his book, Jesus for the Non-Religious, he brings up a couple amazing points in this regard. And a lot of biblical historians believe that Joseph was a made-up character by the biblical narrators to legitimize Jesus, right? Which is the whole point of the Gospels, was to legitimize Jesus to the Jewish people. So they had to make him fit certain prophecies and stuff. Like, this is our guy, right? So if he didn't have a father, that was a no-go for them. Like, you got to have a dad, right? Yeah. So that's why you have this mysterious Joseph figure who appears, and then he's gone. He died or whatever. But there's a couple of really telling remarks, especially in the Gospel of Mark. Mark doesn't even mention Joseph. And there's a part in the Gospel of Mark where they say, isn't this Jesus, the son of Mary? And then the Pharisees at another point say to him, we are not like you. We are not born of fornication like you.
Ooh.
Why would he have been born of fornication if Joseph was his father? You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's not in Luke, Mark, or Matthew or Luke. It's only in Mark.
You know what? There's another theory out there about David in a similar sense. It's speculated by many theologians and Jewish scholars that David was born in an illegitimate situation, which is the reason why when Samuel came to the house of Jesse, Jesse didn't bring David into the fold because he didn't consider David his son in the purest form of a son, which also would explain why David was kind of always rejected alone out there with the sheep. So when Samuel asked, well, this can't be all of your sons. Well, I got another one. So there's a lot of speculation about that as well. So what does that mean if that's the case?
Man.
God shined his special light on someone who was born in an illegitimate from an illegitimate situation, out of fornication perhaps, out of adultery perhaps, which now proves to me, at least, when David said this, not God said to David, David said, I was shapen in sin and born in iniquity, or conceived in iniquity, something to that effect. He was just saying, listen, my mama told me how I got here. It wasn't like everybody else.
Yep. Isn't that what God does all throughout Scripture, though? Is he uses the lowest, the meekest, and the mild of us to share his message with. Like, he never chooses the prince and the king to send his message. He chooses the harlot and the downtrodden and the crazy lunatic prophets of the Old Testament. And it's like, Jesus was born in Nazareth, which was like a truck stop town. And then in Matthew and Luke, they try to change his birth to Bethlehem, King David's city, to make him look more legitimate and paint him a more rosy picture of his upbringing. But he was born in Nazareth, it says in Mark. And, what good can come out of Nazareth, that piece of shit town? And so why wouldn't it fit God's narrative of using the lowest of us to shine his love and his message? What if Jesus was born from a woman who in fornication, Wouldn't that actually be in line with what we see in all of the Old Testament? Wouldn't that speak a greater message of God's love and compassion for humanity?
Listen, Samson was a player. He was a straight up player.
Straight up.
He just played them all. I mean, he was laying up with Delilah. He was
like
a
Dwayne
player.
The Rock Johnson.
This is what he did. But he was a chosen, anointed judge. Yep. So, I mean, we have to look at these stories a lot differently. And I think if we do, as a whole, then we'll stop tearing people down. And I think that's really the goal of this whole thing. We don't want to see people torn down anymore.
Right.
Beat down, made to feel shame and guilt. I remember one time in my church, I said, you know what, I'm going to preach on sex. And I told the women in my church particularly, I said, I want all the women to close your eyes. I want you to think about every man you've been with. Think about it. Think about it. Because I'm preaching on soul ties and how every time you're with someone, they leave a part of them in you. And these soul ties, some I didn't even understand.
Aren't you causing them to sin by making them think about this?
Well, yeah.
Pastor Kyle?
Yeah, thank you. Because they probably weren't thinking. My goal was hopefully to make them feel ashamed because of how many people they had been with.
Yeah.
But like you said, they probably were thinking, man, that doggone Reggie, he did me so good. Oh, man, I call him when I get out of church.
Hey, Reggie.
Thanks, Pastor. I forgot about him.
What am I doing in this lame-ass place anyway?
But yeah, that was my intent. I wanted them to feel sorrowful and shame. I thought if they thought about it long enough, if the number was 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, they would think, oh God, I got to stop this because I've done this too much. But that was when I didn't know anything back then. You understand?
All have sinned and fallen short, Kyle.
Well, let's go ahead and get ready to wrap this up. I don't want to keep you guys, because we can just keep on going.
Oh, yeah.
Just to make it clear to everybody that's listening. But the whole purpose of this conversation, I hope that everyone that's listening comes away feeling less repressed, less rejected, less scorned or ridiculed, that they come away with a sense of being edified, that you're not some monster because you have sexual thoughts. You're not some filthy animal because you're a homosexual. You're not some deviant because you happen to have a penchant for oral sex or anal sex. In other words, you're okay because God made you good. Mm-hmm. And he gave you these feelings to express in the way that he created you. And so
100%.
I'm just throwing that out there, and I want to give you guys a chance for closing remarks, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this puppy up.
Here's my closing remarks. You know, I grew up, again, under the stigma that this is all wrong, this is terrible, this is the most disgusting, terrible thing you can do, and God is just piss poor angry at you all the time. My sister, you know, my sister who's a year and a half younger than me, she got pregnant early on. I really treated her poorly. When my nephew was born, I didn't connect with my nephew because I was living with that religious stigma. My other sister, same thing. My other sister, same thing. My brother, same thing. You know, I was living under that, and I treated them with such, you know, disdain. Well, my youngest sister, this is 2009 now. I've been saved by this point, you know. My sister, she was on our worship team, and she alerted the family that she was pregnant. And I remember saying, "Oh my God, this is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful." Because for the first time in my life, I have the opportunity to treat my family the way they deserve to be treated, with love and honor and respect. And Caitlin was born, and the love that I fell in love with her the very first moment I knew she was coming. That's what happens when you get out of the religious stupidity that we're under.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to love people the way they are and where they are. And the relationship is so strong today simply because I didn't have that stupidity hanging over me over how could you do this. So that was my transformative moment when it came to stuff like this. And, you know, I'm happy for it. I am. I'm grateful for it.
Beautiful,
Awesome.
man. Beautiful. Yeah, somebody who, you know, very much have been where you were, Kyle, just tried to suppress and repress my sexuality into oblivion for my whole teenage years. Somebody who did the Christian thing and got married, you know, as a virgin, trying to do the right thing, follow God's law, and repress what, you know, was wanting to express in my humanity. I can let anyone know listening, it doesn't work. And it's a point of view you cannot win from. You have to be able to accept who you are, gay, straight, black, white, doesn't matter. God made you the way you are on purpose. You are beautiful. You are a wonderful expression of God. And all you need to do is figure out how to express that according to your own integrity. That's it.
Dude, that's amazing. Hey, I just want to say you guys are awesome. And this is going to, when people hear this, they are going to be blessed. I can already hear chains breaking, honestly, because somebody's going to hear this, especially young people, and they're struggling, you know, not really understanding their sexuality and all of that. And I'm going to tell you something, just a moment of transparency for me is that, you know, when I was young, I had sex at a very young age, but it was almost at the point that I felt like I deserved far more than what I was getting. And so when I went off into the military and you know, was a single man and in between, you know, marriages and all of that stuff, man, I was really out there. And I thank God that I didn't hurt anybody, or I didn't get hurt, you know, that I didn't die as a result of my actions. But all this time I was feeling like, oh, God, I'm letting you down. God, I'm angering you. God, you know, please forgive me, and all that. And just like everybody has said this in the course of this message, that God is pleased. God loves us. And once I was able to see this in myself, it helped me to back away from a lot of things that I believed. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what I know, and I'm grateful for knowing guys like you who also No.
Likewise, brother.
Likewise.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
No problem.
absolutely.
It's been a pleasure, no pun intended.
No. Hey, again, thank you both so much. And
Thank you.
That's it, y'all.
Do it again soon.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Stay tuned
Love you
for
guys.
Love you all.
other messages. Love y'all.
Peace.
All right.